Hi, and welcome to Once Upon a Nightmare. I'm your host, Amy Medcalf.
And I'm your other host, Ashley Dory, and welcome to today's nightmare.
So tonight we are discussing an idea brought up to us by a fan, Jen Joyce, and it is the evolution of burials as well as caskets throughout the years.
Kind
Which,
of interesting.
yeah, I never like really touched on the subject or even like thought of like the only thing I would know more about is like Egyptian burials, but it's probably about it.
Well, and they count as a type of burial. So,
Yeah. So, and Viking burials and whatever, but I usually stayed away from death because it makes me anxious. Who wants?
I am a death positive, at least I try to be. I am absolutely terrified myself of dying, but I very openly talk about death and death practices and what I want after death because once I'm dead, I'm not going to be able to tell nobody. So,
And not only that, but like you also want to be a mortician.
I do actually. Yeah, I do.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
I think it would be a lot. Mind you, like I said, I in a previous episode, I'm sure I've told everybody that I'm a CCA by trade. Um, so death is nothing new to me. Um, I feel like it would almost be easier to be on the other side. Whereas as a CCA, you're or PCW, PSW, whatever you want to call yourself, a nurse's aide, different names for us. Um, you kind of get attached to these people. They become your family and then they die, and it's heartbreaking. When you're a mortician,
You don't
there's
know
no
them.
connection.
Yeah.
It's a human
Unless,
life, it is a human being that does need to be treated with respect and dignity, but I don't have any emotional connection. So I think it would be easier to deal with
yeah,
mentally.
fair enough. So yeah, let's sit back, relax,
Grab your
grab a
snacks.
you just wanted to say
I did.
it.
I was getting it in there. I was like, it's mine this time.
And let's get to it. So, did you want to start? Because I'm going to be talking about caskets throughout the ages, and you're going to be talking about funerals and burials. And
Burials, specifically burials, different types of burials, and also different types of different options that you have for your classic funeral.
even in today's society,
Oh, absolutely. Most of it will be from mostly modern, because burial practices of the past, I mean, as much as they are coming back, and we will kind of touch on some of them, but you know, but I would be more than happy to start off.
yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So we're going to start off with different types of burials that you can have. Now, it's going to be different province to province, state to state. You will have to contact your local state authorities and find out what is legal and what is not legal when it comes to bodies. Um, so you can be buried at sea, should you like to. There are different ways you could do that. You could be fully buried at sea, where you take your entire body out. You are enclosed in like a plastic and then chained up, and you have to be weighted down. And there's a certain process that you have to go through for that. And then they drop you into sea, and then you sink to the bottom and you remain there forever. There are deep water biodegradable cremation urns that you can get, and you can become part of those. There's also, you can become part of a coral reef if you are very into the ocean. Lots of options for oceans. If you are more of a green fiend, we do have a green burial, which is where you don't, it's an environmentally sustainable burial. So there's no embalming, there's no chemicals used at all. Um, a lot of it is a family involvement in the process. So a lot of families get involved in the washing process, in the dressing and the, it's very heavily family involved, which is where I think the older style funeral will come into play, where it was more the families that took care of their loved ones after they had passed instead of morticians and coroners and um cremations, that you can be cremated. There's fire cremations, there's now water cremation where you can be cremated by water. Yeah, yeah, there's it is it's a process. It's like a high pressure water. I don't it's cool how they do it. It's I will find pictures and send them to you so that you can post them to our Instagram of a water cremation machine and like a traditional fire cremation.
Hmm.
Very, very neat. Also, with fire cremations, we have to be careful about uh pacemakers and things like that will explode, because people have not told people, and things have gotten by morticians and they've put people into their cremation oven and
Boom.
pop goes the weasel, as they would say. um, but yeah, there's endless possibilities. There's Viking funerals, there's, like you had mentioned, there's Living Reef Memorial in Canada, which is a possibility. You can also have tattoos saved. Um, you can have your skin preserved. You can have a non-traditional viewing. I don't know if you've seen those pictures that have circulated around the internet for can't tell you how many years, where the deceased has been sitting up or on a motorcycle or in a car or boxing in a boxing ring, or
Like how they did back in the day where like with like children or the other dead, they would have to take pictures of the living with the dead.
yeah.
You remember?
My great grandmother had a picture of um, her son in a casket. It's
No,
still actually a very big thing. People still, it's a little more taboo. You don't really see people going up to a casket and being like, click, smile, grandma, I want last picture of you, right?
well, what I mean is like not with the casket, but they're sitting up in a chair and they look like they're alive, but they're dead.
Yeah,
Eyes are open. Like that's what I mean. Like not just the casket ones.
they don't have their eyes open. They can't, which is that could be another practice I could get into, how they close the eyes and the mouth and all of that I could get into, and that's a practice on its own, involvement in the funeral. But you can choose to be embalmed, you can choose to not be embalmed, which is much friendlier on the environment because you're not releasing chemicals back into the environment after you're decomposing. There you can donate your body to science, which is so cool. And then after they're done, you're done with your purpose, they cremate you and give you back to your family, and they're like, here you go, thanks for giving you grandpa, we
Or
learned a
it's like
lot
that.
from him.
Or it's like that one guy that got his uncle's remains and turned his skeleton into a guitar. Did you see that?
You can turn ashes into bullets, firecrackers, diamonds,
Glass,
um
glass
gla-
ornament.
glass blown ornaments. You can have ashes put in a necklace or a watch or a locket that you can carry with you.
Tattoo ink.
Tattoo ink, you can have your ashes put into tattoo ink. You have to check with your local, again, your local authorities about the laws when it comes to releasing cremated remains in woods or rivers. I mean, you can still go just do it. I mean, who's going to stop you realistically? nobody can stop you if they don't see you. I'm putting that out there. They can't stop you if they don't see you. Anyways, check with local authorities on laws about releasing
But they
cremated
do
remains.
always at Disney. Do not do it at Disney.
Don't do it at Disney. Mm-mm. You don't want to be a code white at Disney. But in the woods
They
or
got
like
that
in the
there.
ocean or like on a mountain or by a river, like if that is the spot that your loved one loved, by all means, release them back.
Just don't tell them we said you could do it.
Tell them I said it. It's okay. I'll take the rap for it.
I'll stay out.
But there's also natural, and I wanted to talk about natural burial, which is where, again, like I was saying, your family has more involvement in the cleaning of the body, the dressing of the body, and then instead of being put into a casket, you're wrapped in beautiful cotton, kind of like an Egyptian mummy would be. You're wrapped in your cloth,
Yeah.
and then you are literally just put into the earth, just like that, to decompose and give back to Mother Nature and enrich the soil and give life back after you have become deceased, which I think is a pretty neat option that there is out there now. And there are a lot of green funeral homes opening up, which are allowing more involvement of the family. Because honestly, my mom died 6 years ago, and I, to this day, almost wish I had more involvement in her death process. Um, Not her dying process, but the death process, the preparing the body and dressing her and helping do stuff like that. I wish I had have had more involvement there. So
Mm-hmm.
to know that there's an option that, a funeral home that will help and can give people that, that's really cool to me. That's super cool to me.
Mm-hmm.
And there should be
Yeah.
more of them.
Oh yeah. And like for me, like obviously I was like 11, so I don't know what I would have wanted, but like now as an adult, being so far away from where my mom was buried, I'm like, man, I wish I had her with me instead of like, who knows whenever I'm ever going to go back to Ontario or at least in that area in general. And so when Joshua and I had the house and the money, we're going to have her exhumed and cremated and then brought to us, and so we can have her. And we're also going to get her headstone as well as my nana's ashes, who is buried with my mom as well.
Yeah.
I'm the anyways, so and I don't think my cousin can have a say anyways. Well, definitely not over my mom. I'm not sure about my nana, but screw up. No,
Cousins gets tricky there. Is your aunt living, or
it would
uncle, whichever it
no,
would be?
my uncle, but I have no idea.
If he's living, he would get it.
Yeah, but I don't know where he is. Nobody knows. He disappeared after my nana died. I haven't seen him since I was 12.
Shady people doing shady things.
I did have a shady family. Thankfully, I'm not related to them. But yeah, so that's my plans with my mom. So
I know personally for me, like my mom is buried in Ontario too, but I do have a necklace with a little bit of her ashes in it, and I have some of her hair that I've kept all these years, and I have her funeral clothes, the clothes that she died in. I have those in a bag in my closet, like in a plastic bag tied up inside another plastic bag tied up inside. Oh, there we go again. See, I'm talking about my mom, so she's gonna come around and like steal the spotlight. Inside like a fabric bag to keep the smell of her clothes. So it still smells like her. So every once in a while when I'm feeling really, really down, I'll pull the bag out and like
Cuddle with it.
give it a sniff. It sounds so weird to say, but you know,
You're very
I
blurry.
am very blurry right now, and the more I talk about her, the blurrier I get. So, if you could kindly get away from the camera, that would be great.
Go sit in the kitchen or in the living room.
No,
Like
focus on me.
you can barely like make your face out.
Oh, it's slowly coming back, slowly. We'll just keep talking. You go ahead and we'll talk about caskets. Different types of caskets, history of caskets, the evolution of caskets, because there are plenty. There's also many, 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 many more burial options that I didn't even touch on tonight. But if I got into every little detail of the things that I enjoy, with this podcast would be like 4 hours long.
I would really like to talk about like the Egyptian burials and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So speaking of Egypt, the casket industry traces its roots back to ancient Egypt and the Mesopotamia, where wood, cloth, and paper were used to make sarcophagus-style burial boxes. In the United States, casket manufacturing developed in the late 19th century. Today, it is a $1.2 billion industry. It is crazy how much a casket is. When we were in Nova Scotia, we saw a funeral happening. It was like a white casket, and we're like, that is an expensive casket over there. Like,
we rented my mom. So my mom was cremated, so we didn't actually need the casket. But in order to do the viewing, we didn't want to just stick her in a pine box and be like, here we go. So we rented a casket, which you can do. They have certain models that they keep to rent, and all they do is they take the liners out and they switch those out and put a new one in for each deceased, but they only use it so many times.
Yeah, because of bodily fluids and all that other.
So I think it's only 2 or 3 times that they can use the caskets, and then that casket is done. It can't be used anymore. And to rent my mother's casket, which she just laid in, it was like $600 almost. Like if I will have a look around the house one of these days and find the bill to the funeral.
It's a lot.
Expensive. And we kept it like bare minimum.
So it is a $1.2 billion industry, and Batesville Casket Co. is the leading manufacturer. So the casket industry traces its roots back to ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia. Oh, I read that. Oh, it repeated it. That's why. It wasn't my fault. It repeated it. So like I said, with the cloth and paper used to make sarcophagus style burial boxes, in Europe, the Celts began making caskets out of the flat stones around the year 700. Oof. However, for centuries, caskets were only used to bury aristocrats and nobility. So most bodies were simply wrapped in burial shrouds. In the United States, the early casket industry evolved from local furniture and cabinet makers who doubled as undertakers. A lot of people doubled as something else. Like dentists were also, I forget, they were weird. Anyway, they were also doctors sometimes, dentists, weren't they, or something? I think it just depended on the town and who you were.
I think some like really, really, really small towns would just go to the dentist and be like, you're a doctor. Help me.
Where was I? Oh yeah, they built wood caskets on an as needed basis. During the Civil War, thousands of coffins were needed to transport dead soldiers, marking the start of the mass-produced casket era. Steel caskets first appeared in the late 1840s when Dr. Almond Fisk received a U.S. patent for a cast iron casket that he claimed was airtight and indestructible. Kind of sounds like the Titanic right there. Um,
Leaky.
the bronze finished metallic burial case featured a lid made from a sheet of glass, which allowed mourners to view the deceased. According to the Casket and Funeral Supply Association of America, casket manufacturing developed as a distinct business in the late 19th century. However, most companies only operated in local and regional markets. Batesville Casket Co. was founded in 1884 when local craftsmen began producing handmade wooden coffins in a small town in southeastern Indiana. John Hillenbrand, a lumber merchant and entrepreneur, purchased the company in 1906. Hillenbrand's 4 sons became involved in the business, including George Hillenbrand, who automated the factory to make it more productive. His numerous inventions made innovation Batesville hallmark. Hillenbrand received more than 40 U.S. patents, including one for the first mass-produced metal gasketed casket called the monosteel. Sorry, the E looked like a C. In 1918, Batesville began making metal caskets. Just before World War II, the company developed a process that allowed it to mass produce metal caskets more cost effectively than traditional wood coffins. Which yet we ended up going back to wood, but more glossy and finished. And there's a lot of noise in my background. Ignore it.
We did go back to wood, but there's still a lot of metal in the wood caskets, and there's a lot of seals in caskets.
Well, yeah, they're not like the traditional wood, like where they're like, like vampire caskets.
Even the nicer wood, because you can get some really nice like wooden caskets nowadays that are very plush, very like expensive, just straight up wooden handmade caskets or coffins. But that's the difference between coffins and caskets. So
they look more coffinist. I just made up that word if anybody was wondering. In 1973, 3 years after the 2009 Assembly Plant of the Year opened in Manchester, Tennessee, Batesville began to make hardwood caskets again. Today, the company assembles wood caskets in Batesville. Bronze, copper, and stainless steel caskets are assembled in Batesville, Indiana. So I think the other one is in Batesville, Massachusetts. There's a lot of Batesvilles in the States.
It really is.
The Manchester plant mass produces 18 and 20 gauge carbon steel caskets. By the early 1950s, the CFSA says there were more than 700 casket manufacturers in the United States. However, the decades of consolidation, only 147 companies were still active in 2003. Today, less than a dozen manufacturers assemble more than 90% of all metal caskets sold in the United States. The CFSA estimates that 3 companies, Batesville, Aurora, Casket & Co., and York Group, produce more than 70% of all caskets sold annually. Casket manufacturing in the United States is a $1.2 billion, as I've said before. And in 2004, Costco Wholesale Corp. You can get coffins or caskets at Costco now.
You can get caskets and urns at Costco. You get a 5-pack of caskets.
All while you get your underwear and granola bars. Nobody is judging you. Maybe a little.
Hey, I'm not judging. If you can get a good deal on a casket, I don't give a shit where you get it.
Caused an uproar in the industry when it started to sell steel caskets at low prices. Around the same time, some distributors began importing cheap caskets from China. You could probably get them on Wish now. To address the challenge, in 2005, Batesville created a brand of private label products called North Star. The National Museum of Funeral History in Houston features numerous exhibits on the history of caskets, including a turn of the century casket factory and a display of fantasy coffins from Ghana, such as a car, a jet airliner, and a fish.
Because I want to be buried in a fish.
After, I gotta look this up. We gotta look up fantasy coffins. Earlier this year, another facility, the Museum of Funeral Customs, closed in Springfield, Illinois. Among numerous displays, the museum featured replicas of the caskets used by Abraham Lincoln, John F. Kennedy, and Richard Nixon. So let's look up fantasy.
I'm looking up fantasy coffins right now.
Okay.
You can get buried in a lion if you'd like.
Like a real lion?
Or like a shoe.
A fish.
Yeah.
A boat. A cow.
You could be buried in a cock.
I hope you mean by rooster.
I do mean rooster.
You just said
I
it like
mean,
you think about it before you said it, did you?
You could be buried in a pack of Marlboro cigarettes if you really wanted to. Like there's endless things that you could be buried in a Nokia cell phone.
Listen to this. Celebrating death style. Ghana's fantasy coffins. It is a business that thrives on death, but a group of coffin makers in Ghana has made something quite remarkable out of it. They call themselves fantasy coffin makers and they make coffins that are anything but ordinary, producing caskets in the form of ships, buildings, animals, cars, and much more. They make caskets for families who believe that life transcends death and that the deceased will continue with his or her profession in the afterlife. The idea is that the dead have to be buried in something that represents the job they did while alive. So they remember where they come from and what they have left behind. So what if you work with children?
I guess you'd be buried in a kid.
I guess you'd be buried in an old person.
No Michael Jackson puns. No Michael Jackson puns. Oh, being buried. Anywho,
I would not want to be a gynecologist.
being buried in a big old vagina. Hey, it could be worse. You could be a proctologist. Be buried in a big old asshole. But then you have to talk about, I think you do need to touch on the difference in plus size coffins.
Ooh.
Because there are such a thing as plus size coffins, and there is a certain width in standard coffins, and if you are a little bit bigger, then you got to spend the moolah to get yourself a plus size coffin.
Yeah,
because if you are fat, it costs more to die.
I remember this sounds awful, but I forget who said it to me, probably my godparents. But like I was told I don't know if they were trying to scare me to like lose weight, which they probably were. They're like, if you get too fat, they're gonna have to bury you in a piano bag. Like, because I remember this one guy who was really big, he was too big for a coffin and he had to be buried in a piano bag or something like that. And I was like,
oh, piano box.
I don't think it was a box. I don't know. Something like that. Anyway, I don't know. But it was still like on the top of my mind. It was a long time ago. I was a child. Like, don't tell me these things.
Well, I'm looking at like 6 different options on memorials.com of plus size caskets. Now they're not called plus size, they're called oversized. There's a steel casket, wood casket. Most of them are steel. but it does offer a larger interior than the standard caskets. So metal caskets are made of either 18 or 20 gauge metal, depending on the design. Um, but
It's like,
yeah,
are these caskets necessary? I'm sitting here thinking, I'm like, oh, I would like an over, like, even if I wasn't like a plus size, I'd be like, oh, I really want an oversized casket because I'm very claustrophobic. And then I'm like, but I'd be dead. So I don't know if that really matters.
so I'm just looking. How big are oversized caskets? Oversized caskets are generally considered those that are larger than the standard size in at least one of the following dimensions: length larger than 84 inches, width larger than 28 inches, or a height larger than 23 inches. Those dimensions are the limit of most standard size caskets. So if you are longer or larger than 84 inches width and 28 inches, and so then you would need a plus size. As you've probably noticed, most human bodies can easily fit into a casket of those proportions, but for a good percentage of all people, some estimate as much as 10% of the global population, those dimensions result simply in too tight of a fit. So um, fortunately, we have plus size caskets. A typical oversized casket can be up to 90 inches long, 36 inches wide, and 30 inches tall. Gone are the days in which stories would abound that families of loved people who would say 550 pounds or more would have to search high and low for burial containers large enough to contain their loved one's body for burial. Many stories have been told over the years in which families had to procure for their loved ones large containers intended to be used to shift elephants or pianos over long distances. There you go, Amy.
Yeah. So
These,
it also says here that um uh nobody should worry about not being able to find a casket for fitting a big body, as custom built caskets are quite often made. And I think you can go to any basic casket maker and be like, bro.
well, and most, and like they said, most people fit into a standard size casket. You have to
And
be quite large to like over 500 pounds or
yeah,
higher to need the oversized casket.
and it may also come as a surprise for the prices not to be much higher than the cost of regular coffins.
It
So,
really isn't anymore, which is fantastic.
although buying bras and underwear would say different, but I digress.
There are also alternatives. I do want to read this because since I did do burials and stuff, there are alternatives to oversized caskets. Um, so it's very, very, very easy to procure an oversized casket should the need arise for one. Um, or in very rare cases, a casket big enough can't be located for themselves or loved one. Fortunately for these people, there are sufficient numbers of alternatives. There's obviously cremation is one of them where you don't require a casket or a coffin at all. Cremation. So it pretty much says most cremation urns today are sold in sizes that are not larger than 300 cubic inches. The general rule of thumb for the amount of ashes the body will produce in cremation is 1 cubic inch per pound of body weight. So if you take a 300-pound person, that's going to equivalent 300 cubic inches. So it's going to take up all the space in the earn.
Might
Some
get
people
a couple.
might think as being plus size as an inconvenience. There are always options. Please don't ever feel ashamed or embarrassed by your loved one. Make sure if you do have a plus size loved one who's like a little bit bigger than 400 pounds, you say, we're going to need an oversized casket. Just be upfront and straight with your funeral director. most of them are incredibly respectful and incredibly kind and willing to do anything that you need them to do to make this process much easier.
Yeah, don't pull a Gilbert Grape type thing.
Mm-mm, mm-mm. No, you don't want to be hauled out of your bedroom by a crane or set on fire in your house.
Yeah.
But there's options, lots and lots of options. Don't ever be afraid to talk about death. um Make sure you have a plan and your loved ones know, because unfortunately we're all headed there one day.
Let and become immortal, which fingers crossed, I still have some years.
We still have lots of years left, but it doesn't hurt to start young, and it doesn't hurt especially to have open conversations with children, young children, about death and dying, because it's a completely natural process that we all have to endure, all of us, and it shouldn't be something that's scary,
Yeah.
because then you end up with adults like us who have extreme anxiety over death, and we're like, don't talk about it. If you talk about it, it will come.
Or if you're like me, you gain agoraphobia because of it, and sometimes it's hard to go anywhere. So but
I have that
mine,
too.
but mine is because I dealt with so much death at such a young age. Like, it wasn't just my mom, it was my nana, it was like a few other people in my family that died within 1 year of my growing mind. And I think this is what caused my anxiety over death the most, was somebody saying everything happens in threes. So me and my smart little brain, I'm like, my mom, nana, me. So it's been like that since.
I get it. I get it. I get it. But yeah, so I think that's going to be it for the end of this episode. That's all we really have. There's plenty of more that I could touch on for burial options, because it's unending. But like I said, we would be here forever. And it is currently 10 after 1 in the morning, and I have children and I am very tired. So
And I have to wake up early.
so we are going to end this episode here. Thank you so much to Jen Joyce for the idea, the suggestion. We loved it. It was a great topic to discuss and, learn some death friendly advice, and maybe we helped a
Yeah.
couple people not be so afraid to have the death conversation, because it's very, very important. So
Yeah. All right. Yes, and thank you, Jen Joyce, again for our art. We love it.
I am in love with it so much.
My boss really loves it too. I showed her and she's like, "Oh, I really like it." But yeah, check out our Facebook. I shall have those posted, as well as some other things. I really got to get working on it. I will start a Twitter if I haven't already. I did mention that in the last video that we posted. And our Patreon is up. Again, you get a sticker, you get extra content, you get a mug, depending on the tier that you subscribe to. And the stickers and mugs are very cute. So I designed them myself, kind of. Anyway, it's very cute, and just go check it out. Check out all our social medias, including Instagram and TikTok, which we're still working on. We've had a busy month, but everything's kind of, kids are finally back at school. So
Praise Jesus. Praise Jesus.
we don't have to deal with that anymore. It's just, yeah, until the next big step in one of our personal lives. Yeah.
Well, we'll come to that bridge when we get there.
Exactly. So that is all for tonight. We will, I guess, see you in the next nightmare.
All right, guys. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.